va aller mieux. Bonsoir tout le monde, bienvenue à cette réunion du mois
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting, this April meeting. Already April 14. So once again, welcome to this meeting of our council. And without further ado, the city of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq. Also, dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Once again, welcome to all of you. There are no announcements. Let's move on next to so we've called the meeting to order. Item 5. Do we have quorum? Yes. Councillor Brideau is outside. Councillor Brideau, welcome. So we'll continue with the adoption of the declaration of conflicts of interest. There are no declared conflicts of interest. This will allow us to move on to the adoption of the agenda, moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor José. On the question, no question by council members. All those in favor will say aye, against nay, carried as presented. This brings us now to presentation inquiries and petitions. We've received nothing. Okay, let's move on to the presentation by Kodiak Regional SCMP, who are here with us, with the Sergeant Hébert, Sergeant Hébert, who's with us this evening and who will give us a quick update on what's happening in our area from her viewpoint. Good evening and welcome. Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, councillors, employees, members of the public. This evening, I have 3 pages of information to give you with regard to community policing services. As I said previously, the patrols are continuing in school zones. We thank the public for driving carefully and safely in these zones, which are very important for our children equally. On the 12th and 20th of March, officers from community policing services gave training to the employees of the city of Dieppe. I don't know if any of you were there, but it was about the techniques to defuse violent situations. We were able to provide 2 sessions of training. On March 14, they also did a presentation on internet safety to grade 5 learners at a local school. With regard to the crime reduction group between March 11 and April 11th, this group arrested 7 individuals who were being looked for. The infractions related to operating a vehicle in a dangerous way, possession of prohibited arms, and a man of 45 years had fentanyl and amphetamine when he was arrested, which happened in Dieppe. For a total of 3 individuals known as individuals who harm our communities, they were also arrested by the Crime Reduction Unit. With regard to general investigations, many files are under investigation. So sexual assaults, and discharging a firearm for a particular reason, these investigations involve all the communities in Kodiak region. The National Center Against Exploitation of Children, which is in Ottawa, including the Division J for protection of children on the internet. So Ontario and Sûreté du Québec united their efforts for an important pan-Canadian investigation into harm to children online. This coordinated investigation was done on a national level and undertaken and headed by the OPP, the RCMP, and the Sûreté du Québec. These organizations applied the law of the country and dealt with child exploitation acts online. This happened between the 17th and 28th of February of this year. Up until now, 106 people have been arrested and many dozens of children have been saved. Pornographic material was also seized. In New Brunswick, within those 2 weeks, our section against child exploitation, which is better known under ICE, executed 4 search and seizures. More than 30 people were involved in doing this. Many agencies and 17 judicial authorizations were obtained and executed. 26 electronic devices were seized and will be investigated in the coming weeks. 4 suspects were arrested, and many accusations will come forward in the coming months, and this happened in the Greater Moncton area. I could not speak of the ICE section without making a quick comment. I would like to specify that ICE is a unit which is included in general investigations. I deal with them frequently in my dealings, and this specialized unit is and the agents are determined to save children who are in abusive homes. And despite the work, which is very difficult, psychologically speaking, they work unceasingly to help and save young children. Having been an investigator for over 10 years in this unit, I'm very biased by telling you that this is one of the most important units in the country. With regard to patrols, on April 3rd of this year, we received a complaint relating to the theft of a electric bike. This was parked inside of a building. We wanted to tell citizens that even if their bikes or other items are in, they think a secure area, if they're not, they must be attached or made secure with the lovely weather that's coming. It's not in a hurry to come, but it's coming anyway. There is no doubt that bicycles will be a very popular item for thieves. Since April 1st, we've received a total of 6 complaints related to break-ins in the Dieppe area. 5 of these complaints were founded. 3 of these files have allowed us to identify suspects. These 5 files are still under investigation. On this topic, I would like to encourage the public to report this kind of incident to police. In one of the incidents that I'm talking about, someone said that it's been the 7th time that the same suspect had come to steal from them, but had never been reported to the police. So if it's not reported, we're not aware, and we can't do anything about it. We encourage members of public to report these incidents to us. During from the 1st to the 10th of April, fines and warnings were given out in Dieppe. Once again, the more frequent infractions are expired plates, no plates or no stickers, and speeding over 24 kilometers an hour, but under 50 kilometers an hour. Finally, on April 2nd, I and Superintendent Jeunesse and other officers participated in an undertaking with the community. This meeting was held in the Moncton area. This session was looking to talk to our elected representatives and the residents. We identified this event as an opportunity to improve our responsibility and transparency with regard to our communications plan. We thought we would get many more participants. However, we were able to get many good ideas to move ahead in our operational and communications plan. There will be further consultations throughout the year in each of the municipalities. Thank you to Mayor Lapierre for being there. We were very pleased to see you there. That's it for me. Well, it's ending on a lovely note. In the same vein, I was somewhat disappointed that I was the only person from Dieppe to be at the meeting. I don't know if there was some shortcoming in communications with us, but I think that it was still a great opportunity for our citizens and for me as a citizen to be able to share with others of the region in order to see what's happening elsewhere. And, we often say where we compare ourselves, we can console ourselves. And so thank you for organizing that evening. And probably there will be better participation in the future at upcoming news. There will be one in Dieppe. So you'll have an opportunity to come and join with us. So the residents of Moncton, Riverview, and Dieppe will all be invited, and we hope to see people come out in greater numbers. Thank you. Question by council members. There being none, thank you for your presentation, a very detailed one at that, and continue your great work. Thank you. Thank you. Item 8.2, presentation of financial statements for 2024. Ms. Casey is with us. Good evening and welcome. It's that time of the year. It is that time of the year. Good evening, Your Worship, and I'll give you the audit results for the audited financial statements ending 31st December 2024. First of all, I confirm that our audit was done according to Canadian audit standards, and we are independent from the city. The financial statements have been prepared in conformity with the public sector accounting standards. We did many adjustments and we came to the audited financial statements according to Canadian accounting standards for the public service. So we have an unqualified audit. They are conforming to the public sector accounting standards. And once they're available, we will review and revise the annual report, and that will include the financial statements. With regard to the basis for establishing the financial statements, they're the consolidated financial statements, which include all funds, but also Expansion Dieppe and Gestion 1604. Now, if we look at the results for the financial year, here are the results for the public sector accounting. With regard to revenues, the main revenues come from your taxing mandate. So $71 million, an increase of $6.7 million compared to the previous year. Sale of services, water and sewage, was at 15.8 million for 2024 compared to 15.2 in 23. Contributions to capital contributions for developers. Once the development is done, in the accounting, you have to account for revenue for the value received. So it was $8.8 million in 2024 compared to 4.9 in 2023. With regard to contributions to investments and capital for other governments, these are the grants received for your capital projects. 10.6 million in 2024 compared to 4.0 million in 2023. Your other income was 8.36 million in 2024 compared to 6.3 million in 2023, which means a total of revenues for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024 is 150,491,193 compared to 95 some million. So an increase of some $19 million, almost $20 million over the previous year. Now, if you look at your expenses, this is always presented according to different categories. You will see in the statements, you have the various details by category. With regard to your main expenditures, the protection services were in the amount of $17.4 million comparable to the previous year. Transportation, 17.048 million compared to 16.3 million the previous year. Recreation and culture services, 15.3 million in 24 and an increase of 1.6 million from previous year. General administration services, 10.2 million, an increase of $707,000. Your other expenditures totaled $18.8 million, which means for a total over the fiscal year 2024 is $78.9 million. the expenses were 73.9 million, so an increase of $5 million for expenditures over the previous year. If we look at the total for the fiscal year, the revenues over expenses, so you have an excess of 36.5 million for 2024 compared to 21.6 million dollars in 2023, so a difference of 14.8 million dollars according from the previous year. Now, if we look at your surplus, Mr. Thiriot in the presentation will be giving the details of these figures, but this is part of your audited financial statements. There's a note for reconciliation for public accounting. So the surplus for general operating fund is $134,817. The surplus for water and sewage is at $252,594 for a total surplus of $1,387,411. With regard to the differences, as you notice, there's a big difference between the results of the public sector accounting rather than fund accounting. This is done when we do consolidation of your financial statements. And here, the main adjustments to these gaps are contributions from developers, $8.8 million. So this is not a revenue for the general fund. It is a revenue for the public accounting sector, and contributions from other governments, so grants and subsidies, are $10.6 million. This is a revenue for your audited statements, but it's not done elsewhere. So the long-term debt reimbursement, 6.7 million in 2024. This is an expense in your fund accounting. It is not an expense in your public sector accounting. We have to do an adjustment. Transfers to reserve for the capital fund or for other reserve funds was in the amount of $20.2 million. These were expenses for your fund accounting, but in the public sector accounting, in your audited statements, this was not an expense. These are only internal transfers. The revenue from interest from your reserve funds were in the amount of $2.057 million. And this is once again accounting for your reserve fund, and it's part of your fund accounting. And depreciation of capital, so it's a depreciation. It was an expense of $14.2 million for 2024, and any surplus for the previous year. This is not something which is part of your audited financial statements, so there's an adjustment there. There was a revenue of $535,000, which is part of that performance. So these adjustments and the main differences between the surpluses. Now, with regard to your reserve funds, this is presented in note 17 of your audited financial statements, but you will note that you have 5 reserve funds. So you have the general operating reserve of $3.5 million, so 385,000 more, and your operating budget also had an increase. The general capital fund, this reserve fund is $34 million, so an increase of $6.8 million compared to the previous year. The operating fund for water and sewage went to 727,000 from 690,000. So it's this was met. The maximum was the maximum amount you can contribute. The capital reserve for water and sewage is $5.9 million, and lands for public purposes is at 390,000 for a total in your reserve funds of $45,590,475, an increase of $7.5 million compared to 2023. Now, if you look at the financial ratio, which many cities look at in a very important way. So it's reimbursement of interest and your debt, the percentage of total expenditures for the operating budget over 12 months. You can see your operating fund, the percentage that is represented by debt reimbursement for principal and interest. So in 2024, the ratio for the first time for many years, it's under 10%. So it was at 7.83%. So excellent, congratulations. And so the expenditures are increasing, and you will note perhaps later that the city didn't necessarily have much new debt over the last couple of years. So your debt is on the way down. You have less principal and interest to pay back, and the expenses are coming up, so the ratio is reducing. And in 2023, you'll remember that was 11.2%. However, the city, or as a council, you had made the decision to reimburse debentures and not renew them. So you had this additional amount that caused the increase in the ratio. But 7.83 is a very good ratio for 2024. Now, with regard to your annual investments, and they're really the capital investments that you're making. So for 2024, the city invested, if you will, some $28.46 million in capital. This excludes this contributions to developers. They're really the amounts that were paid by the city. And so you will note that for the past 10 years, it is one of the biggest years. I think it was the building of the Uniplex, which meant huge investments, but in 28.4 million is your investment for 2024. With regard to debt, as I mentioned, you have invested quite a bit, but the outstanding debt continues to diminish from year to year. In 2020, the outstanding debt was $77.46 million, and in 2024, you had reduced that to $46.5 million. And so over the course of 2024, you only received a little over $1 million in new loans, and you had reimbursed 6 point some million dollars. So the ratio went from 52 million to 46.5 million at the end of December 2024. And finally, there are a lot of figures here, but just gives you a comparison between your general operating fund and your property assessments. With regard to 23, 24, and 25, we adjusted to put the property assessment and not the assessment value. So from 2024 to 2025, your total budget went up by 7.6%, but property assessments went up by 12.5%. With regard to the tax rate, there was a reduction for 2025. There was a reduction of 4.5%. You'll note that the last 4 years there's been a reduction in the tax rate asked of citizens of the city of Dieppe. And if you look at the changes over the last 10 years, you will see there have been more reductions than increases in terms of the percentage. The property assessment certainly has increased. So there's an overview of my presentation. If you have any questions by members of council. Questions by council members. Seems that everyone's happy to hear all the good news. And okay, good for that. Is there anything else to do or say? All we have is to ask our big finance guy to come forward and do his presentation on the results. Maybe you can give me 1 minute.
Oh, je pense que on est prêt. Bon, ben.
Okay, I think we're ready. Good evening, Your Worship, Council, my colleagues, and the public. As Ms. Casey just mentioned, I'm going to present our results based on fund accounting and not the public sector accounting basis. So I'm going to show the the water and sewage and the general operating.
OK. Donc, petit aperçu, Madame
So
Casey.
just an overview, Ms. Casey just did a great job to show the major difference between the two accounting methods. In the public sector accounting, the results are fairly high, $36 million, compared to the fund accounting method, which gives 1.4 million surplus, if you look at both together, both funds.
Voyez bien? OK. Donc, je vais vous aller.
Yes. So now, in terms of revenue, what happened? Well, we had a budget of $79 million for general operating. However, in the real revenues were 79.5 million, so almost $500,000 more, and expenses of 78.4 million, so $670,000 difference, which gives a surplus of $1.1 million. Now for the details. For the revenue, first, building permits. We had a budget at 830, but the actuals were almost 1.6 million for a surplus of 760 million. We always try to catch up on our budget every year because we really never know what's going to happen with the interest rates and the market and building permits. But 2024, we exceeded our expectations once again. And for 2025, I increased the budget for building permits as well. Now, interest and other revenue, we have a surplus of $270,000 for a budget amount of 150,000 in real for 420 million. Now, the interest rates went down, but we got some good returns. I had some fixed rate investments for over the next 2, 3, and 4 years in 3 different investments. So that will our interest will still be pretty good, and we have some other cash that contributes to the $270 million of surplus. We hadn't budgeted for any surplus in grants, but we received 650. Now that means that at the end of December, we had a surplus, or rather WorkSafe decided that it was going to redistribute the surplus that they had in their books to all organizations and businesses across New Brunswick, and our part was $500,000. So that's a big part of the 650,000 surplus here. Now, arena revenue, 100,000 surplus, budgeted of 1.6 million, actual 1.6 million, and sponsorship rent, $165,000 surplus. That was, we received some $25,000 in certain case. And I don't have my PowerPoint, so I'm doing this from memory. So yeah, I'm doing it from memory. Transfers to the reserve. Now, I'll take a second to explain this one to you, because at budget time, and I'm going to repeat it, this is a strategy that we use in order to reduce the impact on the budget, to reduce the tax rate for residents, if you will. Here you can see we had a budget of $1.6 million for the reserve, transfers from the reserve. This amount were for one-time expenses. We put those in the reserve. But in our budgets, it means we have expenses of $1.6 million and for these one-time expenses, but we have a revenue of 1.6 million, which is a transfer from the reserve. So it creates a revenue of 1.6 million compared to, and an expenditure of 1.6 million, and the two cancel each other out, and that's how we balance the budget. That's the first part. The second part, now you have to look at what these expenses are. Were they actually incurred during the year? And if not, do we park the money somewhere for some time? Well, in this case, half of it were spent and half of it was not, but that created a surplus in our expenditures. In this case, it was a deficit of 1.5 because we had sufficient surplus for all of the other budget items. So I kept this amount in reserve for this, for the $800,000 that were spent as a surplus. I left them in the reserve for future years. In other words, our 2025 budget, that's how I funded these one-time expenses in 2025. And I'll come back to this. So I'm just preparing the table here for the rest of the expenses. And you can see other revenues here of 74. Our budgeted amount and the actual amount are almost the same. So we pay money out, we receive tax, property tax for about $71 million, 75 million.
Donc, au niveau des salaires, on peut voir
Now,
qu'on a
for
surplus de
salaries, there's a surplus of $2.2 million. It budgeted $24.6 million with actual $22.4 million. Like every year, and we repeat it every year, there are some vacant positions because either they've been put in the budget 2024, but the positions are not filled during the year or at the beginning of the year, so it creates a surplus until somebody is hired. Now, these are people who leave, who are not replaced immediately, so that creates a vacant position for a certain period of time. There's also sick leave, short-term, long-term, which means that the salary is no longer paid by the city, but rather is paid by an organization, so that creates a surplus for us. Transfers to the reserve. Here, we didn't really budget any amount here, but we transferred 2 million. And this was a decision that we made in December because we transferred to the reserve. At that point, we were expecting a $2.3 million of surplus. So we said, we'll take 2 million, we'll put it in the reserve. Operational expenditures. Here, we budgeted 16.6 million, 15.6 million actual, for a surplus of 1 million. Now, the story that I told you earlier, on one-time expenses, well, the fact that we didn't do certain things. For example, in communication, we had $150,000 or $150,000 for signage in the downtown area. That was an expenses in the budgets, but we didn't spend it. So that was a surplus of $150,000. At the same time, we had $235,000 approximately for the high school study, of the secondary and the secondary plan, rather, the secondary plan in Dieppe for growth. And we didn't do that. We didn't spend it. So that was $235,000 that weren't expenses with no budget. So once again, it creates a surplus, which is represented as part of this million. So the Dover Center, we had budgeted $150,000 for the Dover Center, but it only cost us $50,000. So that was a $100,000 surplus, and that's included in the 1 million here. There's a 600,000 or 700,000 of one-time expenses that weren't spent, so they make up this million. And then there are other expenses, for example, snow removal. Well, if you remove the salaries from snow removal, if you just talk about the operational expenses, we had a budget of 1.2 million. It only cost us 900,000. So that's $300,000 that end up in this 1 million surplus here. So that's just to explain that $1 million. External commissions, we had budgeted 13.4. We spent 13,340,000 surplus. And there's two reasons for this. First of all, Kodiak Transpo, their revenues were higher. Well, perhaps revenue should be in the revenue for Kodiak Transport, but we put it with expenses. In other words, when we receive an invoice from Kodiak Transfer, we know what the expenses are, but they remove the revenue that they've received, which means we only pay the difference, and that the difference that I put here as an expense. So because the revenues were much higher, it means we have a surplus here for about $100,000. Another major expense here is for the RCMP. When we merged Squiduk and Greater Lakeburn, there was an agreement at that time that for these two LSDs, these two local service districts, the province was going to, we had to pay the province, and the province was going to serve these regions, was going to offer the RCMP service to these regions. But this agreement ended in March 2024, but I had budgeted for the full year. So there was $300,000 that I had budgeted, but it only cost us $50,000. So we had a surplus of $250,000 approximately for that. That had been budgeted for the full year. But even in October, I wasn't even aware whether we were going to continue to be paying that. So I included it for 2025 as well. So we'll have another surplus in 2025 of about $250,000, $225,000. Now, operating capital. When we transfer amounts to the reserve, and it's something I had explained last December already, we try to estimate what the real costs are, how much is it going to cost us before the end of the year for our capital projects. In this year, we had calculated around $8 million, but in the end, it only cost us $7 million. So there was a surplus of $1 million. But after this, well, what do we do with this $1 million? Well, so on the next line, you'll see it. We paid back a borrowing. So with the work that was done on the roundabout at La France-Gauvin intersection, this was work worth about $5 million, $4 million for general and $1 million for water and sewage. Out of the $4 million, there was a loan that had been asked for from the province. We had asked for 1.9 million, but because we had enough surplus, we paid this $1.9 million cash instead. So we didn't need to borrow it in 2025. It's already paid for. We did the same thing for the water and sewage, and I'll explain that in more detail a little later as well. And the other expenses, 16.5 million, that's here, or 16.5 million with only $72,000 deficit. Now, that's the main points here, but I can stop here and take questions if you have any. Any questions from council?
On continue.
On va continuer prudemment.
Let's continue on then. Okay. Now, for the water and sewage operating fund, once again, we had a surplus of $128,000. We had budgeted 16 million and our actual were 16.2. Now, in terms of the revenue, let's go into the details. We had budgeted for 8.6 million and we ended up with 8.8 real, so surplus of 235,000. These are for their fixed rate water and sewage homes, residences. This is the residential rate mostly. And we estimated 9,100 units and we had $250 extra. So at $948 each, that gives a surplus of $235,000. Now for the variable rate, this is the industrial commercial residence. And here the budget was 3.9 million, but it ended up costing 4 million actual. So we sold more money for the equivalent of about 100 units at $948 each. So 913,000 surplus. Now for the interest, it's the same thing as I mentioned earlier for the interest rate and the cash that was higher. So we had a surplus of 148,000. Transfers from the reserve. Same as earlier, we have one-time amounts put in the reserve, the water and sewage operating reserve, which was 360,000, 368. I don't take any money out of the reserve to fund these from the reserve, but so the money remains in the reserve and it'll be able to be used in 2025 for one-time expenses and other revenues, 2.8 million, 2.8 million. So that gives us a total of $128,000 surplus for water and sewage. Now on the expense side, we can see like for the general fund, there's a surplus of 282, external commissions, a deficit of 80,000. That's for the purchase of water. We had budgeted 3.4 million for cubic, and we purchased it in the end to 3.5 million cubic meters of water. It's the first time since 2012 that we spend the $3.4 million. So even if the population has increased since then, in 2012, we purchased for $3.4 million, and we'd never gone beyond that until 2024, actually. And we just, this year, we reached almost 3.5 million. Administration here, there's a deficit of 268,000, and this is on a case that is underway currently. Transfers to the reserve, 360,000. We budgeted 860. The actual were 500,000 for a surplus of 360. Operating capital, same as for the general fund. We had budgeted $868,000, and it cost us 937,000, so a slight deficit of 69,000. But we were able to pay our borrowing costs. So we had a borrowing cost of $300,000 on the roundabout that we paid cash, and 650,000 on Benjamin Street. So we're not going to borrow for that street either. The 65,000 and 5.7 million for other expenses. The actual were 5.4 million for a surplus of 265, which gives a total $125,000 surplus for expenses. Any questions? No, everybody's sleeping, right? No, not at all. But I don't see any questions anywhere. I mean, it's so clear, right? That we're just rolling in the money, aren't we? Okay, now this is something that we started doing last year, and we had received some good comments because we're trying to allow people to really understand why there's these big differences between the $1 million project, the 1.4 million, compared to the $36 million. So we want to bring it down to a personal level, for example. Or let's take an example of a family here in Dieppe. Let's say they have $100,000 revenues, and on what would happen at the end of the year for this if we compare their results. Let's say if we use the fund accounting method and the public sector accounting method to compare the two. So here, well, this family they have a revenue of $100,000 after tax. Their basic expenditures of food, clothing, restaurant activities, they budgeted for $50,000, but it only cost them $47,000 in fact. And it says 2023, but no, I meant 2024. Sorry, I forgot to change the date. They own a house. They bought it in 2009 for $250,000. They had a 25-year mortgage. They do have mortgage costs, $20,000 per year, so $8,000 on the principal and $12,000 on the in interest. And they were also able to purchase a new car, $25,000. They paid cash for it. They transferred $5,000 from their savings account to their checking account, and this is from the, let's say it's from the general operating fund to the reserve. This is what we mean here. They had to redo their roof for $25,000, but they received government funding of $25,000. This is referring to our construction projects. When we spend $5 million, but we get grants for 3 million of it. But this is sadly one of their relatives passed away, and they inherited a cottage. For example, this is the same thing. It's when we inherit streets or land, we don't get any money, but we receive assets, and these assets have a certain value, and we have to account for it as revenue. If we receive $5 million, we have to account for it as $5 million. It's going to be amortized over the next 15, 20, or 30 years. So that's where there's that disconnect between the revenues and expenses. So now, in the case of this family, when we look at their budget, the first column, you can see that their budget is balanced here. They had revenues of $100,000 and their expenses were $50,000, but it's all money that comes out of their checking account. So there's what we call cash accounting method here. which is comparable to our fund accounting that we have here at the city. They spent 20,000 on the mortgage, 25,000 for the purchase of a car. They transfer $5,000 to their savings account, and they redo their roof. They paid $25,000, but they received $25,000 from the government. So that's their budget. That's their cash accounting. But the fund accounting, the only one that's not exactly what they had budget. Well, it really only cost them $47,000 instead of $50,000. So there's $3,000 more in their checking account at the end of the year. It's the equivalent of when we say we have a surplus of $1.4 million, for example. However, if you look at the public sector accounting method in pink here, you can see that the first two, well, that's the same, $100,000 revenue and $47,000 expenses, that's fine. But the mortgage expense here, it's not 20,000, it's only 12, because 12,000 are the interest costs, that's an expense. But the mortgage itself is a amortization of the capital asset. It's not really an expense. So the public sector says, well, you spent 20,000, but we only recognize 12,000 of that. We don't recognize the 8,000. But for the fund accounting, yeah, 20,000 came out of your checking account. That's an expense of 20,000. So there's a little difference between the two methods here, and so on and so forth. You purchase a car, fund accounting, it's an asset and not an expense. So that's why there's no expense there. A transfer to a savings account, it's the same. It's transferred from account to account, so they cancels each other out. It's not recognized in the public sector accounting. The same thing for the roof. Now here, the roof, we spent $25,000 for an active, because the roof is an active, it's a capital asset, rather. It's a capital asset and is going to be amortized over the next 20 or 25 years. So it's not recognized as an expense. However, you received money from the government. Oh, that one's recognized. That's $25,000 revenue. So that's where you see the disconnect between revenue and expenses, the way that it's recognized. Now, the amortization of the family house, well, it's over 20 years instead of 25. It's $255,000. So that's an expense in the public sector accounting, but for us, because it's not a monetary item, it's not recognized as an expense. And the last one, they inherited a cottage, so it's worth $150,000. The public sector says, okay, it's $150,000. That's what we consider it revenue. Whereas in the fund accounting method, no money has come in, so it's not recognized as revenue. So that's just to try and explain the difference, just to see that on the one hand, the $3,000 is $3,000 that goes up in your checking account, but on the other side, on the public sector side, you seem to have made $203,000. You're not any richer, but you're in a better financial situation because you have a cottage, you've repaired your roof, you've bought a car, but you have $203,000 of a surplus that shows up in this accounting method. And that wraps up my presentation. If you have any questions from council.
Faut croire que c'est clair comme de l'eau de roche.
It seems to be as clear as mud. No questions. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Which brings us to item number 9, questions from members of the public. There are none. Nothing received. No, we haven't received anything from on the social media either. Okay, so that brings us to adoption of the minutes of the last meeting of council. Mover, thank you, Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Jeannet on the question. If there are none, all those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented. Now we turn the page and we're at 10.1, the regular council meeting held on March 24th. We just approved the minutes of the last meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, didn't turn my page quick enough, would seem. So we're now at 11.1, motions, memorandums, and nominations. 11.1.1, ratification of the directives adopted at closed meetings. Mr. Melanson. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Good evening. As we do every now and then, we make public a number of directives when they're wrapped up. So there are 7 of them. As the first one was a directive to develop phase 1 and develop a funding structure for the Trotters Court, Trotter Court. At the time, we thought that it would be within the serviceable boundary, but because of the condition, an in-depth study on the condition of the land, only 30 meters were serviceable, which made the development project much more interesting, much more feasible. And we would put it in this year's budget. We had completed that study and put it on the budget for this year. So we should have a proposal to develop the street during the year or next spring. That was directive number 1. The second one is on staff came to council to show a plan for land purchase for future community needs. There's a series of lots in different areas of the municipality. It was presented to council, and the plan is underway now. So as these lands are acquired, then they will become public. But this evening, what we're making public is just the action, and so we just want to share this idea of land purchase for community needs. The third one we're making public this evening is an interim financing agreement for strategic investment for expansion Dieppe. An agreement was signed. It was duly signed. Funding is available at up to $2 million. This is mostly for the acquisition of strategic lands for future development of our industrial or business parks. Number 4, we presented a plan to apply to the CMHC's Housing Accelerator Fund, the HAF fund. There were 9 different initiatives included to meet the objectives of the HAF, and this is to make this public this evening. The 5th directive was adopted at the end of last year. It was a salary increase for all the non-unionized positions. So it was accepted that 2% be added to the payroll of non-unionized positions for 2025. This has already been in effect since the beginning of the year. Number 6 were funding applications for multiple projects. A project was made available within the Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund program, the CHIF, and we've applied for 3 of them. We're waiting for responses. Of course, everything has been put on pause because of the elections. Now also the extension of Thomas Street, the construction of Lakeburn, a pumping station in the eastern part, and others projects. And the last one is the appointment of a municipal performance department director. It was offered to Paul Chicard, who agreed. He's here this evening. So thank you and welcome to this new position. So these are the 7 directives that we're making public this evening. Thank you. So now we have to propose that all 7, not one at a time. They can all be moved and seconded at the same time. Who would like to move the adoption of this resolution? Councillor Lantaigne. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council ratify the directives adopted at closed meetings of Council concerning the following subtopics. 1, subdivision development, Trotters Court, Phase 1, adopted April 12, 2021. 2, land purchase for community needs, adopted November 27, 2023. 3, interim financing expansion Dieppe, adopted April 8, 2024. 4, action plan CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund, adopted December 9, 2024. 5, salary increase non-unionized positions adopted December 9, 2024. 6, funding applications, multiple projects adopted January 27, 2025. And 7, appointment municipal performance department director adopted February 10, 2025. And I so move. Thank you. Moved by Councillor, sorry, Lantagne. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Le Boutier on the question. All those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented. Which brings us to 11.2.1. 11.2.1, the adoption of financial statements for the financial statements. Who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, that Council adopt the financial statements of the City of Dieppe for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024, as presented by the firm Ernst & Young. And I so move. Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Lantagne on the question. All those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented.
Maintenant, au 11.3 du côté de
11.3, immigration. Mr. Melançon, this file was in the 2025 budget process, was to renew our immigration strategy. So time is flying by, and the strategy had been in place with proposed action. Following an expression of interest, and 3 submissions were requested, 2 were received, and we've recommended that Espace Stratégie for the amount of $40,000, their proposal be accepted. There are 5 criteria were identified in the memorandum in order to select this firm. Staff made the recommendation to offer a contract to Espace Stratégie. Thank you. To read the resolution, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council accept that the consulting firm Espace Stratégie renews Dieppe strategy on immigration at the cost of $40,000 plus HST, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from account number 1-2-20-25-2155, General Operating Fund, Expenses, Immigration, and that Council authorize the budget transfer in the amount of $15,000 from account number 7-4-20-12-8910, General Operating Reserve Fund, to account number 1-2-20-25-2155, General Operating Budget, Expenses, Immigration. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Genin on the question. There being none, all those in favor of this resolution will say aye. Against, nay. The resolution is carried as read. Now on to 11.4 under engineering. 11.4.1, Mr. Melançon. A tender was called for the reconstruction of Gauvin Road. It's situated between Rue du Marché and Rue du Collège. At the roundabout, we received 6 submissions, so an excellent competition, and that one being recommended is LCL Excavation 2006 Incorporated at the cost of $3,344,650 and $250,000 for WSP Canada Incorporated for engineering services. And in addition to constructing the road, it also includes the link to the trail, which will go along Marché Street to Acadie Street. So part of this trail will be concluded to the Marché Street. So this Gauvin Road reconstruction and the pathway will also be built on the recommendation of staff. Thanks. To read the resolution, Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Worship. That Council award the tender for the project entitled 2025 Gauvin Road Reconstruction to the lowest bidder, LCL Excavation 2006 Incorporated, at the cost of $3,344,652 plus HST. Authorize an additional amount of $250,000 plus HST to WSP Canada Inc. for engineering services related to said project, and further authorize these expenditures be defrayed from account number 3-3-35-58-7660, General Capital Budget, Gauvin Road, Water Main, and account number 4-3-90-58-7660, Water and Sewer Capital Budget, Gauvin Road, Water Main. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Le Boutillier, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question. On the question, Councillor Godbout. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up in the estimated price of the engineering and the cost of the project. There's a pretty important gap there, and I would like to understand if you can make clear why the amount is different. I'm sure that they're going to undertake the contract, but without giving any details, but have we been able to establish what is it that explains this important gap between the amount that has been awarded under the contract and the previously estimated amount? It's a good question, thank you. When the engineering did their cost estimates, they used last year's cost, so they went into the higher cost. So every item that we had for the project was the highest possible cost. What we've noticed this year is that there's perhaps more competition. There seem to be fewer projects in the region, and so this is translated into more advantageous pricing for the city. The unit costs we were seeing were maybe related to those from a few years ago. For example, this project was supposed to go ahead in 2023. There were some changes made to the project, but nothing significant. However, the cost that came in this year was even lower than the cost that had come in for the lowest offer in 2023. Does that answer your question? Your Worship, we may also add that this is a contractor who has already done work for the city of Dieppe. We have experience of them and having had work done by this company. And so we have confidence that everything is in conformity and they will meet with their obligations. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor will say aye. Against, nay. The resolution is carried as presented. Now, 11.4.2, tender award for the reconstruction of Leblanc Road, Phase 1. We have done an undertaking to see to reconstructing Leblanc Road. This is Phase 1 because it's a two-phase project. There will be two different projects over the year. Phase 1, we've received 4 tenders for this work, from Fox Creek Road to the new part of Dieppe Boulevard. So this extension, or part of it, is a fairly lengthy part of the road. We recommended Modern Construction 1983 Limited for an amount of $1,234,315 plus HST, and authorized EXP Services to undertake engineering services at the cost of $180,000 plus HST. And after consultation with the residents, we are not putting any water and sewage services at this point in the development. And so people having undertaken and submitted to confirm that this is the situation. And so we're building the surface. There will be a pedestrian part along the Leblanc Road. And this is the project in front of you for approval this evening. Thank you. To read the resolution, Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council award the tender for the project entitled Leblanc Road Reconstruction, Phase 1, to the lowest bidder, Modern Construction, 1983 Limited, at the cost of $1,234,315 plus HST. Authorize EXP Services to undertake the engineering services relating to said project at the cost of $180,000 plus HST, and further authorize these expenditures be defrayed from account number 3-3-35-58-7679, General Capital Budget Reconstruction, Leblanc Road. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question. On the question, Councillor Lanting. Thank you, Your Worship. Have we considered putting in a bike way along there? Maybe there isn't enough room. It's too narrow. Mr. Cormier. Alongside the road, there will be a pathway along the shoulder, which will be about 2.4 meters wide, plus a half meter for gravel, so almost 3 meters wide, where there could be active transportation. It might look like what's along Virginia Avenue here, not far from the path, but it won't necessarily be designated for bicycles and pedestrians. There will be some signage along the way to that effect. Great, thank you. I would like to add that there's a public utility lands along there for quite a long section of it, so we're going to look at how we can maximize the public lands that already belong to the municipality. And so this shoulder is going to be covered in asphalt for bikes? Yes. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of this resolution will say aye. Against, nay. The resolution is carried as presented. This brings us to 11.4.3, purchase of traffic light poles.
Sur l'intersection, excusez-moi, sur
On the intersection of Champlain. Yes, so we have made improvements to this intersection. One of the challenges we often have at intersections is to have poles installed for traffic lights. This year, we decided to purchase the poles before we choose a contractor in the future. So we're going to put in an order. We've invited 3 to tender, and it was Mallard Forestry Equipment Incorporated that's recommended at the amount of $93,638, $93,638 plus HST, and if it's completed on time at the intersection of Acadie Champlain with the poles that should arrive before the project is terminated. Recommendation by staff. Thank you. To read the resolution by Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Worship. The Council authorized the purchase of traffic light poles for the project entitled Champlain-Acadie Intersection Improvements to the lowest bidder, Mallard Forestry Equipment, Inc., at the cost of $93,638 plus HST, and further authorize this expenditure be defrayed from account number 3-3-35-58-7669, General Capital Budget Improvements, Champlain-Acadie. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Le Boutillier, seconded by Councillor Genet. On the question. There being none, all those in favor of the resolution. Sorry, I missed that. It's a comment more than a question. I wanted to thank those who prepared this material to give us the comment that it's a maritime company. The poles will be will be coming from Canada, and so thank you for that extra information. Thank you. On the vote, all those in favor of the resolution will say aye. Against, nay. The resolution is carried as presented. 11.5.1, tender award for the purchase of a truck. For call for tender, we received 3 offers, and I'm surprised that an invitation was sent to several dealers. We received 3 answers, and so there's some competition with regard to this, and to recommend with Lounsbury Automotive Limited at the amount of $66,155.55 plus HST. And so we propose the purchase of this vehicle. So to read the resolution, Councillor Godbout. Thank you. That council award the tender for the purchase of a truck, 2025 Chevrolet Silverado 2500 model for the operations department to Lounsbury Automotive Limited at the cost of $66,155.55 plus HST pursuant to its proposed dated March 19, 2025, and authorize that this expenditure be defrayed from the account number 3-2-20-12-7901, General Capital Budget, Equipment Purchase, Public Works. I so move, Your Worship. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Godbout, seconded by Councillor Brideau. On the question, there being none, all those in favor of this resolution will say, oh, sorry, Councillor Thibodeau. On the question, the question is, this was due to get to 2025, to 2028, and we're changing in 2025. Is something special happening? Does it have more kilometers on the truck? We'll ask for information and share this. Thank you for this question. It's true that every year our vehicles have to go through inspections. Last year, the inspection was done externally, and the vehicle was considered to be in acceptable shape. This year, we did the inspection internally. The mechanics decided that there were issues with the vehicle, and it would put in danger those who would be using the truck. So because it didn't pass inspection, there are no replacement parts. There was no choice but to sell it at auction and to buy a new one. I read all that information, but what was it that happened? Premature deterioration of the suspension. They weren't seen externally when it was inspected in 2024, but was seen in 2025. So this was usage that we were not able to anticipate. Thank you.
Supporter la résolution.
So it was moved by Councillor Godbout, seconded by Councillor Brideau. All those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It carried.
Alors,
It's carried.
11.5.2, détermination.
11.5.2, determination of surplus items, equipment. Mr. Melanson? Yes, I've already talked to you about this. Every now and then we have equipment that don't meet our operational needs or that are no longer used. So there are 3 pieces of equipment that have been identified this evening to make them available and to recover a part of what remains on their expected life. So we have a Walker Newson loader, a John Deere tractor, and a backhoe, a JCB backhoe. Those are the 3 items. The information is in your memo, and it's to authorize their sale to recover a part of the value of the equipment. So this is a recommendation of staff, and the person in charge is here this evening if you have any questions. Well, let's start by reading the resolution. Councillor Lantaigne. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council determined the following equipment as surplus and authorize the Operations Department to proceed with the sale of these items. An IR-003 Wacker Newson loader, an IR-156 John Deere tractor, and a TP-014 JCB backhoe. that council further authorize the operations department to launch a call for tenders for the replacement of said items. And I so move. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Lantin, seconded by Councillor
Jean-Roy sur la question.
Turgeon-Roy on the question. All those in favor of the resolution will signify by saying aye, or contrary, nay. It is carried as presented, which brings us to item 12, municipal, the 12.1, the tree bylaw, municipal bylaws, tree bylaw 2025. This evening you have the summary reading of this bylaw this evening, as well as the third reading by title only. There is a summary that reflects what has been modified. The director made a presentation on this just 2 weeks ago. So this evening, if you have any questions or clarification, if not, you can vote on the adoption of the amendments proposed by staff and the presentations that you heard in the past. So it's in your hands this evening. Thank you. Who would like to read this bylaw? Councillor Jana. Thank you, Your Worship. So bylaw E-1, 2025, tree bylaw, pursuant to the authority vested in it by the Local Governance Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 18, Council of the Municipality of Dieppe duly assembles enacts as follows. The E-1, sections are E-25 are unchanged compared to those of in the bylaw adopted on February 26, 2024, with the exception of the following amendments. Section 1, the addition of a new definition for geotechnical soil analysis, the addition of a definition of the appeal committee. Section 5, subsection 1, to limit the exemptions for surveying activities to a large maximum width of 2 meters. Section 2, an exemption allowed for geotechnical analysis if a plan is provided by a specialized business. Section 7 and 8, the projects exempted by the application of this bylaw have to have been submitted before June 12th, 2023. Section 13, subsection 16, the clerk's office confirms the penalty to an arborist if there's misinformation provided. And 15, if one of or more of the conditions allow the issuance of a certificate of authorization. Section 17, the addition of paragraph 7, conditions of refusal if the site is not adequate to the survival of these trees or could risk damaging structures or services. Subsection 2 of section 17, the appeal committee must have at least one arborist and one citizen. Subsection 5, the case will be heard whether the other parties are present or represented at its own discretion. And in special circumstances, the appeal committee does have the authority to delay or adjourn a hearing. Section 7, the city is responsible for simultaneous interpretation as necessary. Section 21, a wooded zone of a minimum of 2 meters wide and 25 square meters total area is the equivalent of replanting 1 tree. Section 26, the size of the caliber of trees to be planted is 45 millimeters of diameter measured at 15 centimeters from ground level. Section 36, to add a clarification that a deposit is necessary to protect trees close to the project. Section 37, the addition of paragraph 2, instead of financial compensation and the applicant can propose an environmental project with a value added that is higher or level than the financial compensation on this site, either a green canopy or a rain basin or a natural retention basin or other projects approved by the city. Paragraph subsection 3, that the environmental project proposed above to be accepted, it has to meet all of the following conditions. A deposit equivalent to the financial compensation that has to be paid to the city as defined in section 36. B, that it should not be a part of an environmental requirement of another level of government or a specific requirement of the city. Section 40, subsection 1, a correction of the term of a term and a change of a word of a change of and for or and the addition of a fine that can be issued per tree or per 100 square meters of a wooded area. Subsection 2, the change of the word and for or, and I move the summary reading of this. Thank you. It's been moved and moved and seconded on the question. Councillor Thibodeau. Yes, just a clarification here. In section 21, it talks about an exemption for the replanting. Is it not the is that the applicant? Yes, yes, that was a typo. It should say the applicant. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, you end up not seeing them anymore. We've reread it so often. Yeah, we will correct that. If everybody agrees. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Le Boutillier, thank you. Just a question of clarification. At our last presentation, it was suggested that we look at certain individuals that for individuals rather, that there would be a maximum amount that could be charged. Yes, that was assessed with the management, but also if you don't, to avoid having to pay a deposit, we ask people to plant other trees before they cut their trees. So there's no exchange of money, there's no paperwork, so it's a win-win situation. And this is something that we forgot to mention, but it can help people avoid these large amounts. So we're going to promote this to see if it works. And before we propose placing a cap, putting a limit or a cap on the deposit, well, we don't want people to say, well, if I'm going to be capped, anyhow, I'm going to cut 10 down instead of only 5. So, we don't want somebody to increase their volume because the amount has been capped. So that's how we're going to proceed. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's just a comment. I often receive questions from members of the public on this bylaw, all sorts of questions, like, do I have to pay $500 to cut a tree that's dead? All sorts of questions of that type. I think it might be a good idea to prepare a news bulletin an info bulletin and distribute it to all residents. It's just a suggestion. Yes, we've noticed that, and there's on the website, and there's a lot of content there. But we'll look at this with my colleague to see if we can prepare something. But it's you can always send an email. We'll answer all of your questions. Yeah, when we have the bylaw, and if we don't. At the beginning, there's been a number of changes very quickly at the beginning, but now I think our bylaw is comprehensive, and I think it's going to remain as is for a while, so we can start preparing information for our residents. Yes, thank you. Thank you. If there's nothing further, that was the summary reading. Yes, and now It's been moved and seconded in summary reading on the question. No further questions. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. So it's been moved as a summary, and which brings us to the third reading. No, this is third reading by title only. Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. So bylaw E-1 2025 tree bylaw, and I so move this third reading. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Janin, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question, if there are none, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. And it's been moved in third reading. Which brings us to 12.2.1.
Sur l'article A6.
It's bylaw A-6. So you had a presentation by treasurers a few weeks ago already. Time flies. We did receive comments from members of council. Some of the elements were included in the version you have in front of you this evening. A summary reflects the key elements of what was changed to this bylaw. So this evening, you're going to have approval by a first and second reading by title only. And it's for your consideration this evening. It's the levels, the maximums, the increases in the amounts already approved, and amounts that are budgeted or not. And so all of this is part of the amendments that have been made to the bylaw.
OK, on y va.
By title alone, let's go. Bylaw number A6, 2025, a bylaw relating to the approval of budgetary expenditures. Oh, the title by title alone. You were on your way. I thought I had a bunch of work to do. Sorry. Bylaw number A6, 2025, a bylaw relating to the approval of budgetary expenditures. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question, there being none. Oh, sorry. Councillor Godbout. First of all, thank you for presenting this bylaw, taking into consideration some comments, and some of which I put forward. I'm thankful that they're in the changes. I have two follow-up questions. One, we look at the levels of approval. Is there a scenario in what's being proposed by which the person approves a contract and approves the delegation to approve the concept for other things and also can make approval for the amount and the check? So are there always two people who are looking at an approved amount? So are there any scenarios where only one person has all the authority for signing a contract, authorizing a contract, and paying it? Or at all times, are there at least two sets of eyes and authorities looking at this matter? I'm asking the question because I don't have an issue with the delegating authority, but what are the control measures to make sure that the person who's authorizing the contract and approves the contract, another who pays and who signs? On our behalf in finance, we check all purchases that are done over a certain amount, and over $10,000, we look at them all. We look at the verifications, who authorized it, and so on. So it would be captured at that point. And this is done in two ways in reality, not only with the system, but also question as well. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that there was always a second set of eyes on it. And my next question is, when you do a big change when we delegate financial authority, is this something captured more closely next year in our audit by those who are doing the audit to make sure that the policy is being administered? Is this something that we can ask of our auditors to do? Madam Casey is here. I'll take advantage of the fact that she's here to bring it up. I think it's something that we can request, especially in the first year, when we exercise this authorizations to make sure that the control measures are in place. Yes, that's part of their mandate. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, are you ready for all those in favor of the resolution will say aye, against nay. Bylaw A6 2025 is carried in first reading. Now let's move on to the second reading. Councillor Le Boutillier, thank you. Bylaw number A6 2025, a bylaw related to the approval of budgetary expenditures. I so move. Second reading by title alone. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. That still holds? Okay. Any questions by council members? There being none, all those in favor of the resolution will say aye, against nay. This is the motion to carry the second reading. That's it. Notices, inquiries and announcements. We're already there. Let's begin at the other end of the table with Councillor Lantagne. Nothing special for me, just simply I want to mention that I had an opportunity and the privilege to attend the funerals of Antonine Maillet's funeral this past Sunday. It was a great ceremony, and at the height of the esteem we hold for this woman, I consider myself lucky to have been asked to represent this city and to attend the reception which followed. So we thank you for doing that. Councillor Godbout, thank you, Your Worship. I have a follow-up question this evening. We saw with the withdrawal of the carbon tax, we saw that the fuel prices have gone down in our budget. We are a big user of gasoline, and so will there be an impact on the city's budget with regard to the purchase of fuel? Is it a significant amount of reduction to have an impact on our budget? I haven't calculated so far. With regard to snow cleaning, it'll cost less. Those who saw there was a surplus, maybe there'll be, with regard to construction and engineering, there, with the cost we should be receiving, because there's a lot of transportation back and forth. And so that should also reflect this carbon tax reduction for gas prices. Is it important enough to revise the budget? Because there are some sectors in the city. Should we be looking at the forecast to see what the impact will be? Since we don't have that item budgeted specifically for that, it's going to be a little bit more complicated to track it and to make any adjustments, but clearly it could be part of the end of year results. Thank you. I wanted to bring up two other things. One, for the policing authority, the stats for March are available for those of you who want to read them. They seem to be consistent compared to previous years. Nothing was extraordinary for reporting. And I also was glad that you were in attendance at the public meeting that was held in Moncton earlier in the month. We had announced it here at the meeting, and because it was in Moncton last time, we hope that there will be more people coming to an upcoming meeting here in Dieppe. Those who came, I think it's important to encourage our citizens to attend these meetings. They had all their equipment with them. It was really a wonderful opportunity for people to see the drones and the various types of equipment they use. It was a very interesting meeting for the community. If you have a chance to promote it, and I'll send you the letter as soon as I have it and coordinate closer with you so we can include this in our communications with the city, because I think it would be a great opportunity for citizens to see this. Another thing I want to congratulate you once again for your work on the tree bylaw. It's an important bylaw. When we introduced it, we have made an important revision to it, and I think we have seen the appropriateness of the bylaw, and we're starting to get used to it. And for me, when I think about when I wanted to run on council, it was because I want my children to live here in Dieppe, and I think this bylaw will be an important part of the reason why people want to come to Dieppe and live here. Thanks to all the team who did the work, and please keep up. And for this, thank you for this very important revision. That's it. Councillor Turgeon-Roy.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Worship. I simply wanted to ask a follow-up to a question I ask on a regular basis, and Councillor Ernest has asked it in previous years. The Chartersville corner above the intersection where Dieppe Boulevard is, just above where before you turn there, that corner of the street is in really bad shape. And even I think some work had been done in the last few weeks. I'm not sure what's happened there. In any case, I get a lot of complaints from citizens, and it is such a busy street because people want to get to Dieppe Boulevard, to the IGA and that whole area. So can you see if it's on the list? We thought that it would be in coming years, but maybe to see if there's something planned in order to just improve that area of Chartersville. The information I got recently is that there was a water main break there. I might have to go and visit the site. But tomorrow, engineering is supposed to meet the Public Works team to discuss this issue. With regard to work undertaken, there's an item in the budget for 2027 for the time being. That's the re-asphalting of Chartersville. I know that last year we had asked the question, it was the fact that there was a lot of construction in the area and they didn't want to do anything. Now, I don't know if this is still the case, but I want to state it again because it's mentioned to us a lot by citizens, not just people in the neighborhood. This street is a very, very busy one, and it bothers people who live alongside those that area because it's very noisy. We'll pay attention specifically to the patching in our municipal request. So there's the good news that there's a meeting tomorrow, and we're going to need a good patching system there, and there are other streets as well. Yes, I know. So thank you for sharing that it's in the budget for 2027. Thank you. That's it. Have a good week, everyone. Councillor Thibodeau.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor José, you've just raised the same issue that I raised at the last meeting. So other than that, I don't have anything, Your Worship. Councillor Genet. Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anything this evening. Councillor Le Boutillier. Your Worship, it's more, well, lately I've been visiting things, and you know, when you look at communication with our residents, could we have people from communications like we see in many municipalities now with the whole digital, you know, small signs announcing what we're doing? If it would be a possibility, what would the costs be at the entry to our cities or on strategic sites where we could communicate? And I'd like to know what the costs are, if that's possible to do, because I think where the places I've seen recently, you know, they announce festival activities, municipal activities, meetings, a little like what we have at the aquatic center, this kind of signage to show what's happening. If the costs aren't that high, it might be a different way, of communicating with citizens. And so thank you and good evening to everyone. Councillor Brideau. Well, Your Worship, I have nothing to add this evening, but I want to make a quick comment. Because I'm away from the province and the country, it gave me an opportunity to see the council in action this evening. And I think we have such a great council because you look so good this evening. And so that's it, Your Worship, and good evening to you all. We look that way every week. Having said that, I just want to congratulate our young women who play hockey and who played at the Atlantic Championship in Newfoundland and who came back with the big prize in hand. That was very interesting. And as we all know, all our arenas are full, and we're anxious to see the reopening of the arena, and that should be happening between now and the end of the year. Once again, we'll need to have a bit more patience for those of us who love arenas. We know that we'll have other opportunities to help our young people improve all their skills, not just hockey, but other kinds of sports. And that's what we're working toward in our communities. Activities that young people can take advantage of all these, and young adults like all of us here. Good evening to you all.